All right, fantastic. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the BI Livecast series. I'm subbing in for David Teicher today. Big shoes to fill across the board, but my name is Steven Strauss. I'm an SVP at Brand Innovators and have the great fortune of also being the Executive Director of Brand Innovator Labs. And I am super excited to host today's virtual stage. I hope that everybody had a really great and wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I'm based in Texas and have to say things are feeling a bit more normal across the board here. And I know that it's not the same everywhere else, but it does feel like things are headed in the right direction. And so I hope that your holiday was a good one and that you got to celebrate with friends and family, whether that was virtually or in person, depending on where you're at. For those not familiar, maybe it's the first time here at Brand Innovators, we're a community. And as part of that community, our Brand Innovators Labs team advises marketers on the disruptive technologies they should be aware of to help them succeed throughout the entire marketing funnel and across all media platforms. Our goal at Labs is to research and develop relationships with the folks that we think are best in breed across the ad tech, martech, agency, and other solution providers all across the board. To be able to help brands respond to the ever-changing challenges and priorities that brand-side digital leaders and practitioners have across all brands and across all industries. So if you're out there saying, wow, that sounds really interesting and I'd love to learn more, please reach out. I'm sure that we can muster some muscle to help you on the optimization and efficiency front. Now, before we begin, some logistics. So we're using today the On24 platform. And looking at the console on the screen in front of you, all of the windows are movable. At the bottom of the screen, there's a row of widgets that can be used during today's conversations. Now, earlier I mentioned that we're a community, and that means we thrive off of your participation. So if you have a question for today's speakers, if you want to ask something, anything at all, please use the Q&A widget, and we'll try to get through all the questions at the end of the chat. If we don't get there, one of us will reach out directly to you so that we can get that question answered. But please, please, please participate. The media player window should also be up and on the front and the left side of your screen. And please don't forget, on the community side, we are tweeting and having conversations outside of this as well. So please use the hashtag today, hashtag BI Livecast. Again, that's hashtag BI Livecast. Now, it's not too late at this point also to invite a colleague to today's live cast. So if you know somebody who may be interested, please use the paper airplane button at the bottom of the invite, at the bottom to invite them to be able to join. And look, if your friends or colleagues, they just aren't able to make today's session, don't fret. We will be able to watch this on demand and using the exact same link that you use to register for the event. So please send that through. Anybody can register to be able to take part in any and all of the conversations that we're having here at Brand Innovators. If you're looking for a dial-in number, whoops, it's not going to be there. This event is streamed over the internet. So there's no dial-in number. Just simply make sure you've got your computer volume turned up, that your speakers are turned on, and that you're connected to the most satisfactory connection that you can. It's also a really good idea for a good experience to close any unnecessary browser tabs. I know I just closed 37 before I got on this webinar. So if you can do that, that would be a lot better for your experience today. And with all of that, that gets us through some of the logistics, but connected TV, man, how much are we watching today in our own homes? And all the more relevant to the times and the transformations of the TV strategy that your brand has adopted and that you must continue to adapt if you're going to survive. And if you're only advertising on linear TV, you are missing out. So here to explore connected TV's latest features, speak to some of the transformative customer reach driving new sales for thousands of brands and agencies across the globe. I'm excited to introduce a fellow Texan of mine, Catherine Siegling, VP of Advertising at the Mattress Firm, as well as Laura Burks, the Group Media Director for Moroch, working specifically on the McDonald's business. And moderating today's session, a top-notch transformative agency and current Brand Innovators Labs partner, the Goodway Group. And so from that team, we have Ashton Gary, Director of Solutions Consulting, Benjamin Diesbach, Lead of Data Insights Analysis, and Danielle Crowder, VP of Integrated Marketing. So Ashton, I'm excited for you guys to be here. I feel like at this point I've done enough talking. So let's dive in and let's start to have the conversation. Thanks so much for being here, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Stephen, and appreciate the warm welcome. So real quick, just a quick look at who Goodway is, just so for those of you that want to know, like, why are we part of this event in the first place? But really, just to level set, Goodway Group, we're just a different type of marketing and advertising partner. For starters, we've been around for over 90 years. We actually celebrated our 90th birthday last year, and then we made the transition not only to digital, but then also a complete remote culture about 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago. And we have 300 employees working from home all around the globe. And on top of that, we're also 100% self-funded. And so we don't need to answer to any outside investment or stakeholders. And so what this means is that we're not only well equipped to weather this storm because we've already been hunkered down, so to speak, for 15 years and have already been self-funded and already well established there. But more importantly, we get to focus on what matters most to our clients and build the right solutions to solve their marketing and advertising challenges, whether it's in-housing, digital managed service support, ad tech, or MarTech consulting. And the list goes on. And we solve these types of challenges for major brands, including the ones that are represented on this panel today, and many more around the globe. And one of those I was actually speaking to last week, Mark Snow. He's one of our long-term clients at CTAM, Cable and Telco Association for Marketing. And so they have a really unique vantage point, an incredibly unique perspective on the space because they work so closely with the MSOs and the cable providers in each local market. And so one of the insights that he brought up when I was talking to him was that there aren't a lot of necessarily new trends taking place right now. It's just been exponential growth of the existing trends, at least when it pertains to consumer behavior. He also mentioned that we're seeing some people leaving the urban cores, like affluent urban families, millennial families leaving the urban core. But from a consumer behavior standpoint and media consumption standpoint, he said he's seen just this explosion of TV and connected TV consumption, which is just a continuation of the trend we've all seen going for the last, 3, 4, 5 years. And so my first question to you guys, panelists, is, knowing that we've seen such a massive shift in consumer behavior regarding connected TV, and you'll notice that I'm not going to be making any Tiger King references. We've all seen it. We've all seen the guy riding the jet ski. It's great. But let's talk about like the changes you guys have seen from consumer behavior standpoint, and like how have you guys as brands adapted along with your consumers to establish not necessarily your new normal, but your next normal. And so, Kat, I'm going to go to you first. How have you guys seen consumers change? How have you adapted to that next normal?
Absolutely. I think we can all agree that the headlines we see every day and what we're personally experiencing around media and advertising can be quite jarring. I mean, you're reading everything from media consumption changing overnight, advertisers are pulling back, inventory strained with the loss of live sporting events. Even though I did see that cornhole started this past weekend from a live perspective, so there are some new sports out there. There's the uncertainty of the upfronts, the rush to push out new content. I mean, the list goes on and on. But I think you just said it in your opening there. If you take a step back, even with the quick change in the media landscape, some things like the increased consumption of connected TV, it's not new news. It's just growing at a faster rate. And so as a retailer in a world full of unknowns, the benefits of connected TV and an audience-first strategy is key. Sure, I want to reach the mass awareness channels, but equally I want to lean into and leverage data so that I can find those high-value audiences to ensure share of mind to drive consideration and ultimately be able to measure. So as a retailer, we've got to be ready and truly understand where the consumer is consuming media and how we can best intersect with them.
I love that. So, Laura, you have a slightly different perspective, being that you work on behalf of McDonald's. Like, how have you seen this play out in your world?
Definitely. I feel like what Kat said is really what was in my mind as well. We've already seen growth in connected TV. COVID's just accelerated the rate in which consumers are adapting it. But just from looking at devices, looking at the growth within gaming consoles and CTV, you're looking at 35% increase this year, which is huge. So it was already a path that we were going down as a brand, making sure that we can, to Kat's point, engage with our consumers when and where it makes the most sense. But the things that we're also looking at, she mentioned upfront, she mentioned sports, she mentioned just the uncertainty of what the environments will look like from a video standpoint overall. Making sure that we're keeping that in mind as we think about what content do we have access to, where can we engage with consumers, what's going to make the most sense. So having a strategy that tackles that unknown or thinking about it in a different way than we would have previously, I think is going to be really important. With the growth of connected TV, we've seen obviously a ton of growth within subscription-based services, which is great when we think about consumption, right? But from an advertising standpoint, it's not something that we can tap into because those are ad-free environments, but for the most part. So how do we start to look at coming out of pandemic, knowing that that's top of mind right now for so many people? As we've seen unemployment, I think heard today it hit 40 million unemployed within the United States. What are the economic impacts coming out of COVID? How do we need to adjust for that next normal and ultimately the new normal, what that will look like? So how do we start to tap into different inventory sources through CTV for those that are cutting the cord because cable's too expensive, that are cord shavers? They need to start getting rid of some of the subscription services they're paying for every month, or those that are actually looking to layer on some of those free inventory sources that we can tap into as advertisers. So there's a lot at play, but all things that are being taken into consideration as we start to figure out how we evolve and come out of this.
Yeah, no, you bring up a lot of great points, and the subscription services don't really give us a great opportunity to tap into those when they're freemium or ad free entirely. And a lot of folks have been actually offering free months or free weeks more so than they normally used to, and so that's definitely put a strain on things. So Ben, you offered a very unique perspective here, being, our analytics guy, and also the guy that I have the dubious distinction of stealing several of your slides throughout your career and using them as my own. Here's your chance to show everyone that it's not Ashton talking, but it's actually Ben talking behind Ashton. What have you seen, and how have you seen brands shift?
Thanks, Ashton. Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly been a unique time in our history, and we've observed some really interesting trends play out for CTV and the digital landscape in general, I'd say. For instance, what we saw is when new COVID cases really started to ramp up in late March and early April, CPMs and channels like video and display began to retreat. But CTV actually held strong and even saw an increase, which kind of bucked a larger directional trend for digital. And I think this really helps demonstrate the relevance of the connected TV channel right now as consumers have adjusted to a new normal and, how they're consuming content. And I think it's certainly possible that what is happening right now with content and device consumption could leave a more permanent imprint, even as we get further and further past this pandemic. So it's been very interesting to see and to follow.
For sure. And you actually touched on we're already starting to get questions coming in, which is great to see. So those of you watching along at home, please keep those questions coming. And we'll definitely answer all of these as we go. But you've already teased out a little bit of the answer on how we've seen CPMs react on the connected TV side of things. So Danielle, same question. What are your thoughts on this?
So when we think about, the CTV landscape, I want to make sure that we think about it as an enhancement to larger TV or video strategies, and not necessarily as a standalone tactic. And really, it's all about that audience first targeting strategy. That's really part of a bigger communication plan. I think when we think about consumers, they always go to new channels faster than brands do. And so kind of like, the gals touched upon is like, this is a trend that's just been accelerated over time, but there are, things to consider as far as before you even jump into the space? Because I think most advertisers understand that they need to be there. Really, the question is how, because this is a pretty complex ecosystem once you start to dig into it. So there's some basic questions that kind of need to be answered before you even get to the point where you can start, planning this channel. So things like, does the investment live with your linear teams or is it with your digital teams? Are you thinking about CTV as an awareness tactic or a performance tactic? And if you've been in the space a while, you're probably thinking about it as both. Is it a content strategy that you're going after versus an audience first approach, which is more of a digital approach? And then, are you doing direct placements with publishers and distributors, or are you using the flexibility and agility of the programmatic space? So I think, there's pros and cons to how different brands approach the space. But I think what's really important is that, however you choose to prioritize your media investment, you're thinking it that it's measurable and it's comparable such that you are able to make data-driven decisions about how you spend in your different marketing channels.
Totally agree. And love your point about how CTV is just, granted, it is a big touch point. It's the largest screen in the room, but it's still part of a much larger customer journey. And so I totally agree with that. And when we think about customer journeys and how this COVID situation has essentially journeyed across the globe, across the country, this next normal, this new normal is manifesting itself differently at a national versus local level very differently because it's hitting different markets at different times. So Danielle, I'm going to stay on you. How have you seen this play out in a local fashion? If you're wanting to tap into, as Kat said, the cornhole championship, if you're wanting to support that brand, how would you do that at a national versus a local level?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting dynamic that's happening right now. So obviously, it's really important to align your messaging to the current situation. So there was some research done, and 60% of consumers said they want brands to address the pandemic, but in their own unique and authentic way. And so the two brands we have on the panel are perfect examples. So with Mattress Firm, giving consumers the choice of whether to come into the store or purchase online or contactless delivery. It really recognizes that they're putting the consumer first in what they need to best, fulfill their, consumer journey. McDonald's is doing a fantastic job right now. They've got a great ad running talking about, the way we gather with friends and family looks very different right now, but we can have that shared experience, enjoying McDonald's and sharing, our love for one another. That bringing us back to the way things once were, right? When we all enjoyed our, quarter pounder with cheese. But then, when we think about bringing that down to a local level, right, it's, how the pandemic has impacted local communities varies greatly, right, between different parts of the U.S. So while the national unemployment rate, in May was 14.7%, that varies anywhere from 8% in Connecticut to 28% in Nevada. And so what the need state and values are within those different marketplaces can be addressed through CTV in, differentiating your marketing message. And I think that's really where national and local play really nicely together. But having that local presence and addressing what, companies are doing in those local communities to help the rebuild and recovery, I think that's what's going to give brands a competitive advantage over just talking at a national level to kind of cover everybody with one message.
That's a great point. So knowing that all of these shifts are happening at such a, micro level, that's a lot of data to keep up with. It's a lot to track and measure and follow along with. So Ben, you're the guy that knows all the numbers. How have you helped, or how are you able to help brands as they're, considering how they should be approaching this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, we've been trying to be as proactive as possible with this in terms of how we lead our clients and manage our campaigns. And, in addition to just carefully monitoring, national versus localized data for our campaigns, we've also developed a public facing dashboard that you can actually access via the Goodway website that monitors programmatic pricing and competitive trends at national, regional, and industry levels. And I think, one thing that we've seen are localized trends, specifically around pricing and competition, do differentiate to some degree based on the relative impact felt by COVID-19. So for instance, something we've observed when we look across our network is that harder hit states, I think, felt a sharper bottom at the onset of COVID-19, both from a CPM standpoint and in really kind of a bidders per auction competition standpoint compared to other states. And, some of these hardest hit states they're large markets with population density like New York and California. So, this has a real impact in terms of optimizing and planning at a localized level. And it also does ladder back up to the national level since some of these markets are such big parts of those strategies. So, our goal with a tool like this is just to be able to really proactively monitor and respond to these trends in an appropriate fashion and drive the best results that we can for our clients during this time.
Yeah, and like those dashboards, those of you listening along at home, like we'll post the link so you guys can see those. But I was actually talking to a local AAF group yesterday and was showing them some of those dashboards, and they were blown away by like how insightful it will be for brands to help them, be not necessarily predictive, but at least proactive, a little more proactive versus being reactive. And so, Laura, like McDonald's, we know you work with a lot of the co-ops within McDonald's. Like, local is their bread and butter. Like, how have you seen this play out? Like, how has this affected you in your day-to-day?
Yep, it's pretty much turned our world upside down, as you can imagine. Just thinking about, to your point, working with owner-operators, we're talking to the people who are writing the checks, right? So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of their investment, that we're making recommendations that will help move their business forward. So there's been a lot of conversation within agency, with the clients, with the corporate team on recovery and revival, which is how we're referring to it, and will be locally led. And what we're seeing, to the points that have been made previously, is that different parts of the country are coming out of different times. So some have been more impacted than others. From a COVID standpoint, from looking at media consumption, bigger shifts in certain markets versus others. And so there's a lot of things that we're taking into consideration as we go back and plan. But what we are focused on is making sure that we're, again, being good stewards of our clients' dollars, making sure that we're driving the efficiencies that we need to, and looking at how can we make sure that we are applying data to make sure that we're focused on our consumer first, that audience first approach. How do we also use that information from a competitive conquesting standpoint? Obviously, everyone is looking for people to come into their restaurants. McDonald's is not the only one. So how do we take location-based data and apply it to our campaigns to, again, be smarter and bring different strategies and thinking forward? But it's going to be interesting as we start to get back into the marketplace. And there's a lot of scenario that's going on with key trigger dates, making sure that if we need to adjust because we have another wave of COVID, that we have the ability to do so. So again, making sure that we can focus on more of those, what we're calling nimble media channels. So CTV is an integral part of the plans as we start to think about the upcoming months. And to Danielle's point, it's making sure that the message we're putting out there is also aligning with the consumer sentiment. So the brands being very cautious in terms of what products we're talking about, how we're talking about that, and how we think that consumers will receive them and react so that we can continue to get the stores, restaurants back up and running at capacity.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and like it makes sense to me that the real-time nature of connected TV allows you guys to pivot much more quickly and seamlessly versus having to look at it from from a upfront perspective. Like, you're able to pivot more real time, right?
Exactly.
So, Kat, same question to you. Like, knowing that like Mattress Firm has locations everywhere. Lots of places. How is this? And national has always been a major focus for you guys, but you've also done a great job of maintaining a local presence, even pre-COVID. Like, you've had a great balance of that national and local. And so how have you seen that shift during this time?
Yeah, for us, it's clear that normalcy is an ever-changing word, if you will. Every day looks and feels a little bit different. And as a retailer, all retailers have some sort of seasonality that may or may not have been thrown out the window during this COVID timeframe. And what's going on locally is continuously changing. That's true for how the customers are shopping and how we're meeting their needs. So Danielle hit on some of the ways that we're making sure that we can intersect with them and put them in a safe shopping environment. But as a nationwide retailer, there's never been a cookie cutter approach that we've taken. Because we know that we can't get the same results from one plan in Sacramento that we do in Cleveland, that we do in Houston. Sure, there's national strategies that really create that halo effect and gets us across our border-to-border, coast-to-coast footprint. But local activation is key and imperative to drive to store or even to drive to .com. So for us, it's continuing on and maybe even elevating a little bit more a true bottoms-up approach, because every day we're looking to see what's going on with every individual store so that we can let consumers know that we're open for, quote-unquote regular business, if it's by appointment only, or, if it's contactless by speaking to a sleep expert. I think everyone hit on it already, but it's truly making sure that we're meeting the customer's needs in that given, geography.
Yeah, and that has to be a very difficult task. And it seems like the word agility is the phrase that pays a lot lately, where we're able to continuously shift and pivot based off of what the normal is for right now, to your point. And so, with that in mind, knowing that local is really in the bottoms up approach is really become a larger focus for you. What does that mean for your national strategies? How have your national strategies really pivoted as a result of this? Kat, we'll stay on you too for this, Kat. Sorry.
The foundational elements of our national strategies continue on. That gives us the scale and efficiencies that we want. So we still keep true with that. But then we're looking at what are those leading and lagging indicators at the local level to say, where do we need to really, go in further or pull back based off of what's happening. So it's even things out a little bit, but still national does play a role for our business and will continue to do so.
Got it. And then Danielle, given your space of your understanding of the connected TV space as part of the larger journey and all of that, what are you seeing happen as a result at a national level?
So I think one of the biggest things we're seeing right now is planning timelines have really been compressed. So where before national might be planning 6 to 12 months in advance, now it's a 1 to 3 month timeline, right? So speed, agility, and flexibility is really what's needed right now. And we're also seeing advertisers, kind of shying away a little bit from some of the large upfront commitments. So whether it be uncertainty around live sports, or is there going to be new content in third and fourth quarter, along with the economic impact happening, it's sort of leaving a lot of dollars on the table right now that need to be redeployed. And so even if marketers do kind of pull back on spending budgets, it's really imperative right now that suppliers prove that every dollar that they're investing is working harder in the channels that they are spending in. And that's actually easier and faster to do within those digital channels.
Yeah. And I think there's been almost a leveling of the playing field to a certain degree, in that the major brands that were relying on an Olympics or some major social event to be associated with this summer, and maybe even this early in the fall, it may even affect folks World Series advertisers. That major event isn't going to be there. And so brands are having to pivot and shift their thinking so that they're able to realize those gains in a different fashion. And so totally agree with what you're saying about agility. It's just further reiterating that point that agility just seems to be the king for the moment right now. Just being able to pivot like that. And so we can't talk about CTV without talking about measurement. And I actually also see a question in here from Lindsay about measurement and attribution. Connected TV is a bit of an unusual animal here from the standpoint of, you can't click on connected TV, you just put fingerprints on the screen. So Laura, I know with McDonald's, you guys have to have a unique approach to attribution there. And it's not always the easiest for you guys. Like, so what's your approach right now for attribution?
Yeah, great question. To your point, it's harder to track and measure. But when we look at connected TV, we are also looking at how do all of our channels help drive foot traffic to the restaurant? When you talk about McDonald's, I'm not sure how many people click on the website, but most people are familiar with the brand, with the menu. It's not something that you necessarily visit the site. And obviously it's done e-com, and with the exception of having the opportunity to do mobile order pay or sign up for delivery. But tracking gets very, very messy and very complex as we start to think about this particular channel. So foot traffic is going to be the key measure for us. How do we make sure that we're driving not just existing consumers back to the restaurants, but how are we looking at behavioral lift? So that incremental user that we didn't previously see. It could be from the past 30 days, 60 days, whatever we set that look back window at. But we're also looking too of how does CTV allow us the opportunity to secure incremental reach? So using technology like ACR and being able to limit the consumers that have seen our ads on TV and target those on connected TV that haven't. Again, McDonald's, you've got to hit a lot of eyeballs. You've got to make a lot of influence when you are in market to move the needle from a business standpoint, because there are so many transactions on a daily basis. Still, even in the landscape that we're living in and the reality of COVID, every transaction matters. Every transaction mattered before, but I think it's even more important now. So again, just being able to tie everything back and be able to measure that traffic that we're driving is going to be really important.
Yeah, that's a good point. The ACR piece is something that I think a lot of brands tend to overlook sometimes is, what were the exposures that happened maybe inside or outside of the CTV landscape? Like, how can we supplement that and also be part of that, make sure that we're monitoring that customer journey throughout? And so I think that's a great point. That's a really important way, or a key way to help close some of these gaps from a measurement perspective. So Danielle, what about you? Like when you think about measurement as it pertains to advanced TV, connected TV, and the full journey for that matter, like especially now, like what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think we're in a really interesting and exciting time within the ad tech world. So I'm going to quote Jeff Green here for a minute, who's the CEO of Trade Desk. And he said, there's no touch point that's more impactful or measurable than CTV. And I have to agree. Throughout my career, I, kind of came up through the ranks in media teams doing planning and buying. And whether it was working with car dealers or QSRs or retailers, every client's the same. And they would say, Danielle, when we run on TV, people come to our store, right? And they're right. But the problem was the only way we could really measure TV impact was through TRP's reach and frequency. And now, with CTV, we can start to, measure more metrics like completed views, viewability, conversions through other channels that, we can tie back through device IDs. And then, taking it a step further, thinking about multi-touch attribution and lift studies, which I know is Ben's sweet spot. So I'm sure he's going to talk more about that. But, it's really exciting to be able to see now that we can start to connect the dots, like how that TV impression and specifically CTV actually drives people through the purchase funnel from awareness all the way down to action.
That's a great point, and I love that quote from Jeff Green. Like I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right. Like CTV does provide the ideal intersection of measurement and impact at the same time. So that's something I'm going to be using. That thanks Danielle and Jeff.
It's exciting stuff. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. And you did a nice job moderating and giving me a good segue into Ben there. Like, Ben you did pretty nicely. What do you think about measurement and, as it pertains to lift too? Like, let's hit him with all of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think to Danielle's point, I think outcome-based measurement from CTV is getting a lot better. So, I think I totally agree with Jeff Green's point. And, when I think about measurement, like, a key thing I always like to remind myself and folks I work with is don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. There is no perfect approach. There is always noise you're not going to be able to control for. That's just the way things are, especially in the digital landscape. But you can get really, really strong directional barometers to make a decision. So, yeah, for me, measurement is more important than ever right now. I think, marketers have to be cautious with the media investments due to everything that has happened, COVID so far, but also kind of the continued volatility and unknown factors as we look towards the immediate future. So, what this means is their budgets need to work twice as hard for them. So as a result, we're really focused on leveraging our data and available tools to help them understand what they're getting back for their investment on an incremental return basis and how they can leverage this data in a swift test and learn framework. So, we try to do this in multiple different ways. I would say, perhaps most prominently, we utilize ongoing A/B lift testing with user level holdout and targeting groups within the CTV buying platforms that we work in. And this really helps us prove the incremental return of media and then make those subsequent adjustments. Additionally, I think we really like to interrogate the customer journey and kind of understand how media channels and strategies are working together across the funnel to drive incremental business outcomes. So you think about connected TV or, really any upper funnel channel, the purpose is not necessarily to elicit an immediate response, right? Like it's to raise awareness and consideration, which ultimately helps seed downstream demand capture for channels like paid search and display, which are lower in the funnel. So, we can measure this cross-channel journey to kind of really help understand this synergistic impact when it happens and kind of how to account for it in terms of, the marketing results that we provide back. So I think, from a digital measurement standpoint, that's one thing I'd say. But I would say, if possible, I think it's an important question, especially right now, to look at from both a bottoms up and a top down standpoint where, bottoms up is really what I just described, right? It's your typical kind of user level holdout approach or cross-channel attribution approach. And top down can be leveraging things like, marketing mix models or market level testing. And I think what this does is, getting multiple data points can provide a more diverse view of how you understand, benefits and caveats of different testing approaches to use, because none are perfect. And the more good information you have, the better decisions that you can make. I think, just really quickly, the challenge historically with marketing mix modeling, as I'm sure, many of you guys know, is the readouts typically lag 3 to 6 months due to the time needed for robust data collection. But, this is a unique time, and companies that provide those services are navigating it as well. So, I would encourage any marketer to, in addition to the digital work they're doing, also push their MMM providers to help them get at least a directional read of their investments from a top-down standpoint, and really arm yourself with all of the good data points that you can.
Yeah, that's a really good point. When we get into the digital world, as digital folks, we're good at a couple things. One is overcomplicating things that don't need to be that complex, and letting perfect be the enemy of good. I think those two just tend to go hand in hand. And so, to your point of the balancing act of marketing or media mix models and multi-touch attribution and real-time insights and takeaways from a lift or incrementality perspective, a lot of marketers, it's like they're calling JG Wentworth and they're calling 877 Insights now on their media spend. They want to know immediately what's happening. And in certain areas, yes, you're able to deliver those immediate short-term results. But in other cases, you have to maybe wait a little bit longer, like your 30, 60, 90 days, or even 6 months for that media mix model to output some of that incrementality. So Ben, I want to dive a little bit deeper on this, from a cross-device. And you mentioned also, pushing users through the funnel, through to search, and from connected TV through display and to search. Talk to us about some of the things you're doing to help connect some of those dots and connect users through that path to purchase.
Yeah, so I think it's something, it's something we've looked at, on all of the clients we work with from a connected TV standpoint to really understand that path. And, we're actually developing tools now for more kind of scaled use across the organization that can look at what that path looks like across different industries and verticals and kind of the incremental impact that different sequences of media exposures are having. So, we think this is a very valuable thing. Media is meant to work on a funnel and reach consumers at different stages of consideration. And I think what we're finding for the most part is that's actually what's happening, which is great. But I think now we're armed with more data than ever to leverage that to make data-driven decisions from it versus going off of the assumption, that is happening. So I agree that CTV is more measurable than ever. There's still improvement to be made, as there is with anything, but I think it's really been getting there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So, Kat, I know you guys, you work with a few different agencies. You have, a media mix model in place, and you're exploring multi-touch attribution, things like that. And you've also worked with us on connecting the dots across your various digital touch points. So, how are you approaching, just measurement in general, and then also just where you're able to derive those insights, whether it's incrementality or lift or, what matters most to you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the way that we've approached it and applied some of the insights and learnings with different studies we've actually run with the Goodway Group previously is we wanted to take a step back and better understand how CTV impacts our traffic to our website as well as conversion rates, and to look at what happens across channel tactics. And so the learnings that we did get from that, Ben spoke to them a little bit previously, is that we see connected TV as an assist channel that's going to provide significant lift and increase in conversion when it's used in conjunction with something else. So we know that we're going to get a good 1-2 punch out of putting the multiple tactics in play. We've also got different learnings too on the impact of frequency, that we've got room to scale that so that we can drive incremental lift. So for us, it's taking some of those, more recent learnings from the studies that we've run and applying those during these, COVID and post-COVID timeframes to make sure whatever budgets we're working with, we're going to get the most out of them.
Perfect. And so, as we think about evolving into this, next normal, new normal, a lot of folks are looking for answers, myself included. I'm always looking for some friendly advice from my fellow marketers to help me figure out what is up, what is down, what should I do here? So, Kat, I'm going to leave the mic on you for now. But do you have any advice that you want to share with your fellow marketer right now, while you have the floor?
Yeah, absolutely. I think no matter what time we're in or what environment we're in, we as marketers are always challenged to make sure that we're getting the best return on the dollars that we're putting out there, and to truly know where to spend the next dollar that we have available. So that doesn't really change, but what's different from my seat in today's climate, these words have been used quite a bit today and then previously, is never before has fluidity and agility been more pronounced in retail. So that ability to truly address the rapid changes in the consumer behavior and understanding that impact on your business is a priority. You have to plan for what you know. You quickly gain insights. It's not going to be perfect, as we said earlier. And you've got to optimize in hours and days versus what previously might have been weeks and months. But you've got to do it in such a way that you don't become erratic. So I think from my standpoint, understanding my company's true north, what I found is that the fundamentals of such have really truly not changed in today's environment. Just the approach of what will lead you to that winnable game might look and feel a little bit different. But in a world rich with data, that just gives us more insights and learnings quickly so that we can adapt and that we can change. So you've got to constantly trying things differently, seeing what comes from it, and move on to the next thing, or keep repeating what's working.
Totally agree. And I think that you bring up a great point in that, we all felt like we were going to have all this extra downtime or free time when this happened. And then literally 48 to 72 hours after we hunkered down, we're like, no, wait, we're working harder, we're working more, the stakes are higher. And to your point, what we thought would normally take us 3, 6, 9 months to complete, we're now doing in 3, 6, 9 hours. We've got to really fly through this. And so that's definitely been a major eye opener for me, so to speak. And so, couldn't agree more with that. Laura, what about you? What would you want to tell your marketing friends?
Yeah, I think we've said it multiple times, but agility is the theme. I would say just stay nimble. If our world wasn't already moving at an ever rapid pace, we just hit the accelerator. So what might have worked previously, what mixes might have worked, what executions, what process might not work in the reality that we're living in today. So just be open, keep an open mind, make sure that you're thinking about things in new ways to drive efficiencies, to get things done, to make sure that we can continue to bring that cash register up. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's the goal. So that's what I would say, is just continue to stay flexible.
Yeah, that's so true. And Ben, you kind of doled out a ton of advice earlier about, perfect being the enemy of good. You don't need to rely on that one single source of truth. Like, you may need to get a difference of opinion. Whether it's a siloed data set within your programmatic or social or search solution, or multi-touch attribution, media mix model, all of that. Like, combine all of those opinions together and find the truth as quickly as you can to where it's a relevant and valuable insight to run with. But do you have anything you'd like to add? I know you already kind of waxed poetic earlier, but I want to make sure you have a chance to share any other advice.
No, I think that's exactly right. That there's not enough. We're operating in shorter cycles right now, and there's simply not enough time to hyperanalyze something too much. So, analyze the data sources that you have around you and make sound decisions about which ones you want to look at to help inform your strategy. And it's okay if it's more than one. There is not going to be a perfect solution, and that shouldn't be the expectation. I think the other thing I would say is, just in general, the world is changing right now, and the landscape that we're going to be in when we come out of this, and as we come out of this, is going to be much different, especially from a marketing landscape standpoint, than it was before. So, as we're moving in quicker cycles right now and adapting and testing and learning, these are great insights for the future of organizations as they market and they evolve their strategies. And I think those who begin to figure it out now and do a great job, that'll really propel them forward in the future.
Love it. All right, Danielle, what about you?
It's hard to top what all of these incredible people have just said, but specific to CTV, I would say, look, your consumers are here. So if you haven't dipped your foot in the pool yet, now is the time to do so. You don't want to miss the opportunity to reach these consumers who are creating new habits in this new world. But the basic marketing principles still apply. It's just on a much faster pace. And so, understanding and defining your business goals, setting baseline metrics, assessing your progress. Don't be afraid to test and learn in these new environments. And then, be agile, adjust your plan for maximum impact as you learn. As more data comes in, as you learn more, then you pivot and you improve. So those basic principles still apply.
Perfect. Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of data out there that speaks to, if you're cautious and trying to figure out where to go, what to do, and you haven't dipped your toes into CTV, now is the right time to do it, because pricing is a little bit more appetizing. Granted, the risks may be a little higher, but it is there's a lot of data out there that speaks to the fact that brands that advertise and maintain their presence during a crisis like this end up bigger, faster, stronger on the other side. And so, there's a lot to be said for that. So that's the end of all of the questions that I had planned for us as a dialogue for the group, but we have more than 10 questions here from those of you following along at home. So I'm super impressed by that. Love the engagement and love the questions here. So I'm going to go through these, just see if I can sort it in order of received. Doesn't look like it. It looks like those of you that said your question was a high priority, you got moved to the top. So those of you that are still looking to submit questions and you want to make sure they get answered, submit it with high priority. We'll go through we'll get through this list as fast as we can. And if there's any others, feel free to reach out to me, agary@goodwaygroup.com, and I can make sure all your questions get answered. So this first one here is from Ed. He's asking about completion rate. They talk quite a bit about that. And what kind of benchmarks do you all evaluate for a specific successful campaign? So, Danielle, I'll throw this up to you. How do you view completion rate as a KPI, and when you're asked to evaluate, a CTV buy, what place does completion rate have for you as a KPI?
Yeah, so I think it's an important one to look at from the standpoint of, generally speaking, when, we're looking at completion rates on CTV, so thinking about the biggest screen in the home, it's usually pretty high, just given the fact that people are like choosing to engage in this content. Also, there's fewer commercials, so people seem to be a little bit more prone to sitting through them, knowing that they only have to sit through maybe 3 or 4 versus on linear where they may have to sit through 7 or 8 before their content comes back on. So, I mean, from a benchmark standpoint, we try to, look at anywhere, 75% or greater is good, but a lot of times we see a lot higher than that.
Got it. Yeah, it is one of those metrics that you kind of need to make sure you're not cheating the system by looking at CTV as a mix within video on your completion rate. You got to look at it separately for sure. Anyone else want to add anything to that on the panel?
Yeah, I think just the viewing experience, you have a more leaned in audience. So to Danielle's point, you typically see higher completion rates. So again, it's a metric that we look at, but it's not one we're focused on, especially when we think about making sure that we're able to drive that behavioral lift and foot traffic to our restaurants.
Good point. And next question, unless someone else wants to add, we can go jump to our next question. So this one is from Adam, and he said, someone mentioned using location data. I think this was you, Laura. What other types of data have been useful as you to speak to your customers during COVID? So Laura, I'll let you have the mic on this one, and then I'll open it up to everyone else on the panel if they want to add too. But what other data providers, in addition to location data, has been relevant to you lately?
We've applied third-party BT segments to align with the different products that we're talking about. But since COVID started, to be completely honest, the focus really has been how do we conserve dollars as we try to figure out where we need to prioritize for the rest of the year. So not a whole lot to speak to about data segments with COVID and related media, but just knowing that we have a wealth of opportunity to tap into any sort of BT is really important for us.
Definitely. And like looking at things like, drive-through intenders versus a delivery intender, that sort of thing, like those sorts of segments are available, and I'm sure they do help quite a bit too, huh?
Exactly.
Anyone else want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, from our standpoint on location data, we're using some of those third-party insights and services as we're exploring where retail is turning back on, so we can look at this or DMA level and see what did it look like pre-COVID, and then what trends are we seeing now as we're moving into the new norm.
Definitely. And actually, this is a good segue into the next question. Wes says, this is a question for you, Kat. How does your customer, let's see if we can translate here. How does your customer picture your brand differently today versus 6 months ago? Like, are you experimenting on ways to drive more transactions online versus traditional retail?
Yeah, we've been an omni retailer for as long as possible from that standpoint. And so I do think that we have evolved the business and do approach the business a little bit differently. And people who might have previously preferred to go into one of our locations because it's a high touch purchase. It's obviously something you spend a third of your life on your mattress. So you want to make sure that it feels right for you. But what we've really seen during this time is people still need a great night's sleep, and they need it as quick as possible. So by having the true omni experience where you can go to mattressfirm.com and you can take, some of our different sleep quizzes and things like that, you can still get the high touch approach that you would in a store, but you're just doing it from an online perspective, and you're able to still get your products to you very, very quickly. So I think more people are more aware that you can experience this in any way that you want to.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like one thing I've noticed too that you guys have done a great job of is like while you guys aren't technically a D2C brand, you kind of have adopted a lot of D2C like strategies for your business, like the e-com side of things. Like, yeah, that business has definitely exploded for you guys recently, but you've also onboarded bed-in-a-box brands that, you know, the expectation with those brands and that experience is such that customers don't necessarily need to, you know, try it before they buy it, so to speak. Like there's less of that experiential aspect required there. And so from my perspective, you know, kind of a little bit of an outsider looking in, but also, you know, working pretty closely with you guys, like that seems to be one of those trends that's become an exponential growth versus a net new trend, so to speak. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would. We've always been known for our breadth of selection in the products that we carry. And what we've been able to show here during these times is that we've been able to grow that assortment and what options are available to best meet the customer's needs, and what we're seeing out there from a trends perspective and just really what people are interested in and wanting. So we've been able to adapt and grow with that.
Uh-oh, I think we've lost Kat's video. All right, well, let's move on to the next question, and let's keep going. All right. Let's see here. So someone has asked, with programmatic coming to connected TV, there are different ways to transact. What kind of private marketplace or audience deals are you considering? Danielle, that sounds like one for you. Like, how are you approaching, you know, some of that's getting into the nitty gritty. And I think Adam's looking to getting down in the weeds here, but let's see if you can give him a quick response on how this is playing out from a site direct or a PMP perspective.
Yeah, so it is a really good question. Obviously, you know, our priority is always to establish PMP deals and work directly with the publishers. Not only does that give us better pricing and better transparency into what we're buying, but it also helps through supply chain optimization, reduce some of the costs that happen when you have multiple players in the supply chain kind of taking a little bit of an ad tech tax each step of the way. So we feel like PMPs that work directly with the publishers is the best way to guarantee that you're getting the best inventory with little to no ad fraud.
Totally agree. And I think, you know, just to add to that, one thing that I've heard in the space is, you know, it's constructing a sound CTV buy. The effort equals the outcome, so to speak. Like you have to put in the time and piece together all of the right components and all of the right touch points and all of the right content channels and providers to get to the holistic reach that you're looking for to reach your target consumers. And so, you know, depending on who you ask, like, you know, a max of 11 to maybe 25% reach within one given channel. And so that doesn't set you up to do a set it and forget it type of buy. You kind of have to make sure that you're putting in the effort and the energy to, you know, piece together what are the pieces I need. Like I can't just go in and say, okay, I've added Hulu, I'm done. You know, you've got to think about like what other programmatic channels do I need to add? What site directs or publisher direct opportunities should I be layering in as well? So yeah, that's a great point.
And I think too, you know, another piece of it is, you know, there are so many people out there selling programmatic. And I think the key differentiator is working with experts who have been in this space. And so, you know, Goodway was in programmatic since the very beginning. And so, you know, we've learned along the way, whether it was display, mobile, video, native, audio, like as every channel has come online, you know, we've, you know, had that base expertise, and then it was learning about the channel more so than learning about programmatic channels and how, you know, how programmatic works, right? And so I think because of the level of expertise that we bring to it, we understand the ecosystem, we understand, you know, the best way to, you know, aggregate this inventory. We've sort of done the heavy lifting for the advertisers already with the PMPs we've, you know, created. You know, we try to make it as easy and seamless as possible for advertisers to, you know, get into this space without a lot of headache.
Definitely. And Kat, Laura, Ben, anything you guys want to add to that one?
From a PMP standpoint, I think too, it's important to look at what inventory is pooled within that private marketplace deal. And as you talk about, you can't just pick a Hulu and say I'm done. But when you start to layer in multiple inventory sources, how are you looking at unduplicated reach? How are you making sure that it's not just the same person that you're talking to, that it's not a frequency play, that we are looking at reach, to your point earlier, and generating as much awareness as we possibly can during any given promotion.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're right at 2:00. So Stephen, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in and wrap us up, but yeah, I think we're there. And there he is. There's the guy.
I made it. Okay, perfect. Oh, guys, thank you so much for the time. This was really great. We really enjoyed it. One of the things, and we talked about community, but I really enjoyed all of the questions that came through and everybody being able to speak to those. It's a community at the end of the day, and we're trying to help each other. We're trying to figure out what's best and how all of it works. So some really great insights there. And one of the things that I drew from and I thought was especially important is the importance of test and learn campaigns, and that we're still having that conversation. We're still speaking to those things. And it's one of the interesting topics to me, especially in working directly with many brands to do this. But there's a lot of conversation around test and learns. But let's be honest, like, how many of us as marketers are actually doing it? And are you coming up with what those test and learn philosophies are? Are you relying on others to make those decisions for you? Like, what are the most crucial and important things? And if there's one thing that I totally agree with, it's the importance of looking at stepping out of your comfort zone and actually testing new ideas. So I challenge everybody out there, please, each of you, get out there, try something different, try something new. It seems scary. It seems different. It seems that we might not be able to make it work. Well, so what? Challenge the partners that you have. Change your attitude. Challenge the partners to deliver in new and unique ways. And one of the other big takeaways of that conversation: measure the progress. Right? If we don't measure it, what good is it? So, guys, thank you very much. Really enjoyed that. Special thank you to the Goodway Group, Ashton, Benjamin, Danielle. Really, really great conversation from the folks at the Mattress Firm. Laura, really appreciated it. Kat, really appreciated it. And Laura from Moroch, thank you so much for the educational insights today. Now, don't forget, you got to tune in just a little bit later today, starting at 3:30 Eastern time. We're going to be talking about direct-to-consumer marketing. We've got the folks from MGemmy as well as Way who are going to be here to talk all about what that marketplace has looked like over the last few months and what the future holds there. And additionally, one of our big pieces, please don't miss out, coming up on June 5th, Brands Across America, a virtual full-day event with some incredible senior marketers speaking as brand innovators salutes all of the first responders in marketing and media. So please feel free to tune in for that and check out the website, brand-innovators.com, to find out all of the upcoming additional events that we have in addition to those that I've just mentioned. So thank you to everyone today. We really appreciate you being here. We really appreciate you taking in some of the insights. And until next time, wait, that's in 27 minutes. We will see you. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.
Thank you.